Hello and welcome to Royale Without Cheese, our bi-weekly podcast in which we discuss both the classic and the unknown of art and popular cinema from then and now. We are your hosts, me, Tomás Ferreira, Leonardo Miranda,
Hello.
and Miguel Aido.
Hey there.
Today we talk about Once Upon a Time in America by Sergio Leone, a suggestion by today's special guest, a RWC podcast listener and Texas-based writer-director, Jake Abraham. As always, before any ado, don't forget to subscribe, leave a comment, or simply give us a like. Once Upon a Time in America is a 1984 epic crime drama directed by Sergio Leone, starring Robert De Niro and James Woods. The film chronicles the lives of best friends Noodles and Max as they lead a group of ghetto youths rising to preeminence in New York City's gangster underworld. The final film directed by Leone before his death, and the first feature film he had directed in 13 years, it is also the third installment of Leone's Once Upon a Time trilogy, which includes Once Upon a Time in the West and Duck, Yes Sucker. With different versions released worldwide at the time of its reception, the film received mixed reviews by American critics, much dissatisfied with its long runtime. However, over time the film has since been ranked as one of the best gangster films, and indeed one of the best from Leone. That's all well and merry, but what did RWC and company think about the Italian master's final adventure in the American landscape of crime, love, lust, and greed? Well, friends, let's dive in, shall we? So here we are, Jake. We would like to introduce you first a little bit for our listeners at home. We know you are an emerging filmmaker who has attended the Lee Strasberg Film and Theatre Institute and also worked on a couple of TV series backed by CW and Paramount Plus. And also you're forging your own path as a director as well with your short Daddy Warbucks that was released last year, I think in the Dallas Theatre, if I'm not mistaken. But passing the baton on to you, we really would like to ask, how has your journey been so far? What films do you want to create? It all seems very exciting. And of course, how does Sergio Leone come up in all of this? Why did you pick it for tonight?
Well, thank you guys for having me on. This is great. So excited to be here. And also, that was really impressive the way you just rattled all that off. I would have do that.
A lot of
Gross.
turning frangos, turning chickens.
Very good. Very good. And yes, you did your research, so thank you. So yes, I'm Jake. I'm located in Dallas, Texas. I'm a filmmaker, and I just finished my latest short. It's been my first, I guess, what you'd call professionally produced short. It was a SAG-AFTRA, back to fair, and it's called Daddy Warbucks. And I think you'll start to connect the dots when I describe it a little bit. It's a period piece set in the 1950s. Very like kind of ravish looking and very, fancifully lit and, characters in suits and well groomed and a lot of fluid camera movements and blocking. And the film is, like I said, it's set in the 1950s in Louisiana, and it follows sort of a family conflict over a mortgage foreclosure, and how that kind of brings the family together and also separates it a little bit. If you watch it, you can see how I'd like a film like Once Upon a Time in America, that sort of classic period style with that sort of photography and that sort of lower storytelling, I guess you could say. But yes, that all that to say, this film was definitely an influence on Daddy Warbucks. So yeah.
And I have to say, one of the most lovelier aspects of your movie is really the how do you pull off the period essence of it. I mean, that gas station is incredible because it's very reminiscent of Edward Hopper paintings somehow to me, when I saw it.
Great.
So hats off there, in the trying to realize that I was watching it and I said to myself, well, that is a feat. That is a feat to realize that on screen for a short film very well.
Well, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah,
Yeah.
so a lot of work went into making it feel as period as possible. And it's just one of those things, there was like one of those gas stations like an hour away. And, it's funny because the backdrop is all modern and there's people driving by like, fuck you, and, flipping us off
Damn
and like,
it.
throwing shit. And we're, keep rolling. And,
Oh God.
that sort of thing. But no, yes, thank you for saying that. All of our
Yeah,
locations were super, super fun and
definitely.
very period. So.
And great performances, great actors. I really like the one who is his boss, I think, of the main character.
Yeah.
He really has a presence on screen, I felt. But yeah, following up on Once Upon a Time in America, what do you remember of being, your first, let's say, memory of the film? When was the first time you watched it? Can you remember? Was it very early on, or no?
That's a good question. I think I was pretty young. Probably too young. I want to say I was about like
4 years old.
3 years old. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
No, maybe like 13, 14. No, probably like 14, 15. Anyways, and I remember I was just sort of getting into film, and I was just trying to watch everything I could, and I'd heard of this movie, and oh, this is the spaghetti Western guy, right? And I sort of turned it on, and then I went, Jesus, this is really long. But and at the time I was like, okay, well, music was good, looked good. I like Robert De Niro, and I was like, okay, good film, and never really gave it much credence beyond that. But then years later, you know, I became more interested in this style of filmmaking. Like, obviously I love period pieces, and I love Sergio Leone and just the way he shoots and the way he tells stories. And I thought, let me check that one out again. And I did, and I was just so, um, it's just one of those movies. It's just very moving on all accounts, I feel like. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I'm a big fan for sure.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I mean, I'll pass on the word to my fellows over here because I've talked to them, so I want to hear what they think first. This was my second time watching it, so I'm curious what they think. I don't know. Was it your first time, you guys, or no?
Yeah, it
Actually,
was my
I don't.
first time. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember
Uh,
because I thought we'd seen this in film school, but I don't think so.
Yeah. We
if
watched
we
Once
saw,
Upon
it
a
was
Time
only
in
a
the West.
scene.
Yeah, no
Yes,
memories
yes,
came of other
yes,
scenes,
yes.
so yeah, maybe it's just the one. But yeah, then again, it was my first. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. Didn't really feel like almost 4 hours, to be honest. It's very engaging as a film.
There's a difference, like what ice cream are you going to pick? 4 hours of Tarkovsky or 4 hours of Sergio Leone? One you can watch better than the other. I mean, I love Tarkovsky, but
Yeah.
one goes down better than
Yeah.
the other.
Mhm.
Definitely,
Yeah.
it's interesting to compare 4 hour movies. Yeah, yeah,
I don't know about Lenin, but yeah, my first
yeah.
impression is pretty solid. Yeah, pretty solid film.
Yeah, I like the film. I think I didn't get, something. I think if, when a film doesn't quite click yet, I'm a bit at that stage, I think. There were some things that I was just a little, I'm not sure about
Yeah, me
some
too.
moments and some decisions in the filmmaking, in the way the music comes in and all that. But by the end, I get what's happening, and it's like an impressive achievement just on a purely technical level. Uh, I mean, it's such a long film, but to maintain, like, there's always something happening that, at least visually speaking, is so interesting. And I love the beginning is very silent. There's not a lot of dialogue, and there's these moments where he builds so much tension just from like an elevator coming down, and the guy with the bloody face turning his face, and just so much tension. Then the gunshot goes off, and like that type of thing is always super thrilling to watch because it feels so. It's the basics of cinema. It's like these blocks of images coming together, and that type of stuff I love.
Yeah, yeah, for sure, I agree. And I think the sort of I don't know how you say, maybe you have some expression, but in media res, so you go straight to the action, and you start completely sort of, yeah, not expecting things to be so in the moment already. It's something that's really engaging, I think, and really reels you in because you really don't know where the story is going. And for me, yeah, that first half an hour is very interesting to see. Okay, this is taking some time, but I want to keep watching it. So yeah, it's a very interesting start, I think.
It's this film when I saw it for the first time. I was alone in the UK doing my masters. It was at the very beginning, so it was a while ago. And when I saw it, I was completely in love. I still am in love the second time, but it was the start of my masters in directing. So it was really like I was in good company. I was very alone, and this film felt like a good baked bread, like something that gave me life again. And I love Leone. My absolute favorite of his perhaps is around two movies, which are The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, and Once Upon a Time in the West for me. But this one is also amazing in its construction and mise-en-scène as well. It has what I call moments that, just go through your heart like a bullet, because the way they are done in the way he operates music and the visuals creates a kind of pathos that goes beyond words. He is really good at getting you close to the subjective point of view of his characters. And what's odd about this opening, which is an amazing opening, is that you open with a character that it's totally not one of the main characters. She's like someone who becomes his girlfriend very late in the game. No backstory to her, a very side character, not interesting at all. And we open with her, but even there, he does a disservice to you. The way he opens with her in that room, trying to figure out there's something is off. He really inspects visually. This is every action, piece by piece, unfolding the whole behavior of the character as she flicks the light. Oh no, something is off. Completely dark. Someone turned off the electricity. Something is not going well. I go near the bear. Turn off another light. That doesn't work, And everything is very operatic and mechanical, and it's very within her thought process, I think, and that is applicable to every other character, as much as Robert De Niro himself. And these bullet moments, the very first one is when you have these cuts in time where you see his memory jumping back in time, forward or backwards, and it's just delicious because he's capable of uniting the sound to make the bridge between those points in time, which is amazing. And it all comments on this greater theme of the world fades, the riches fade, the riches that we conquered through our work, through our ambition. And everything seems a little bit dark, but at the same time, not very different. There's still gangs on the streets. There's still poverty. There's still, all of that, despite being the America of the 60s. And it's all very poetic and poignant. And I think, as for that bullet moments, for example, what I mean is that first moment where he's in the opium Chinese theater and he's, with the dope and everything. And there's that cut to the light from the flame to the street light. Amazing. When I saw that, like I went like orgasmic cinephile moment, like what the fuck? And then he deconstructs the whole scene little by little. He doesn't unveil anything like on a master shot, the wide shot. It's just the light and these dark, shady figures in the middle of the streets, these firemen, and the fire and the water. It's like he has something akin to Akira Kurosawa, what he does with his epics. He just embraces every element and he creates a canvas with it. And finally, he unveils the bodies on the streets. Like, what is this main scene? What is the main focus of this scenery? Oh, the bodies, the kind of decomposed friends that he left behind. So it all leaves dramatic questions that are very interesting. Who are these people and who is Noodles in the middle of all of this? And of course, the other magical moment that is in that setup later on is when he returns to New York and he goes to the bathroom when he returns to his friend's kind of coffee house, where he had this like little back end bar, and he goes into the bathroom, which is very interesting. I always like to kind of liaise dirty environments with intimacy. I think that works very well in filmmaking narrative. And he goes to that stool, he gets up in there, takes that brick. And again, through a jump in time, through his eyes, they change and we see this flashback. That was another moment that was completely beautiful. And the film is just filled with all of this. So, Jake, what do you think? Were these moments something that got inscribed in you, from first, second viewing?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Just like you said, that bathroom scene, and then the way she dances and the way they have the bags of flour sort of rising. That's one of those things, I don't want to sound kind of corny about it, but that's one of the things where you watch and you go, oh yeah, this is why movies are movies. You know what I mean? I mean, there are so many moments in here like that. I mean, I took like pages of notes of like, oh, well, let me bring this up, but yeah, no, I mean, there's so many moments like that. I'm trying to go through some, definitely that scene. Oh, and I love the opening when he's having his sort of opium dream, and there is a theory that the whole film is an opium dream. I don't know how much
All right.
that's kind of, but
Yeah.
there's when he's obviously having the trip, and there's that phone ringing as it sort of at the beginning as it flashes from
phone.
image to image.
The phone was so annoying to me in the beginning.
Oh, really? Wow.
Because it did
Stop
not
playing.
stop. I actually became like anxious.
Yeah, Ennio Morricone definitely did not do work on the phone. That was just straight phone. But yeah, no, I mean, I find stuff like that interesting. And it's just to me, it's a very, like you said, kind of annoying, kind of jarring way to do that. Oh, of course, the beach scene with Max. I think James Woods is so great, and I think. One of the things I think about this movie, and I've heard a lot of differing opinions, which I guess I understand, but I disagree. I feel like he just gets these Max and Noodles. I feel like he gets the two of them so right, and they're so vivid to me. And I just like the flashback in their final confrontation to them as children. It almost feels like, oh yeah, you kind of go, oh right, that we've been there, and that's like a great flashback to me because I go, it's not to reveal information, it's to like sort of cue something in you and you go, oh right, yeah, these guys have, there's a similar one in There Will Be Blood towards the end when you see
Oh
HW
yeah, we
and
talked about it. Yeah.
Daniel.
Hmm.
Yeah, that's right. I've seen that
I know
episode.
exactly.
Well, actually, I couldn't really understand that episode,
Yeah,
but you know,
I imagine.
Portuguese is a little rusty, but no, like things like that. It really kind of makes you go, oh right, yeah, wow, we started here, and now we're here. And there are just so many moments like that. I mean, I'm just gonna end up listing them off. But the dinner scene where they dance and you know, this of course the shot where they walk across and there's the bridge in the background. That's like, Dom
Yeah,
doing
that's
his
the
little
iconic
dance,
shot. Yeah.
and then he gets shot like 2 seconds later. But
Tomas mentioned the sort of flashbacks, and I really do like sort of the first one. I guess it's the first one where we jumped sort of 30 years into the future, which happens, I think, right at the train station next to this. I don't even know how to say, like this Coney Island facade thing.
yeah,
And it's an amazing camera movement where you just see De Niro with sort of old makeup, and it's so subtle, it's so slow as well, which is kind of odd to think because the jump is so high, or long better. But yeah, but it's so interesting the way it just jumps so forward in time. I think it's one of those moments that I really picked up on.
And that's interesting because he uses the music from the Beatles yesterday, like in the background,
Yeah,
of the
it's
of
like
the
a Miyazaki
soundscape, which is an
version. It's
interesting
very
choice. Yeah, yeah,
simplified.
I'll say
yeah. That's
that's the
true.
one choice in this movie that I don't like. But
Yeah, yeah.
that, that's the one thing,
The
everything
one
else I
thing.
feel like
Okay,
it
fair enough, fair enough, fair
works
enough.
for me. But yeah, that I went, ugh.
It's a little bit of a. It's not really an anachronism because it is of the time. Let's say 66 or,
Just
but
jumps out.
you
Yeah.
don't associate Leone with Beatles. I guess
Yeah, and
you
it's
know.
it, it's not even the ver right. I don't know. It just I love Yesterday and I love the Beatles, but it was really jarring to me, and I went. I feel like Morricone could have taken that and run with it, but I don't know.
Of course,
And
right.
part of it is also
But
because Morricone has such a very relatively small number of songs that he uses in this film. He doesn't really get away much from the themes that we constantly hear, which are all very good. I mean, for sure, but yeah, it's something that goes off that kind of jars on you, I think. So part of it maybe from that. But yeah, on Americana, it's interesting how, yeah, so many small escapes from the themes, but it's still so beautiful and emotional as well. Part of it because of these mellow instruments with the flute, but yeah, but I thought it was interesting that it's so interesting, even though choices aren't that many for our film as well.
but I think that's also what makes it interesting that he's very, let's say, minimal with
Oh
the
yeah, sure.
music. You know, I mean, he reworks it a bit, but it's essentially the same theme, so to speak, motif reworked a couple of times, but
That's why it's so impressive.
essentially, yeah, yeah, definitely. It's so charged with nostalgia, so to speak. This capability to project you to the past without necessarily needing a flashback, oftenly, so that the music allows you like to jump you. You are seeing him remembering things, and the music comes, and you're already inside of him. That's kind of like how his poesy works with his directors so well. And also, I love the flute, the pan flute that is integrated diegetically in the action. One of the characters has it, And as they become richer, the flute becomes more kind of adorned, which I kind of like that detail. But it adds a sort of indigenous mystique to it. You know, I don't know. Well, yeah, because it's like from the Andes and South America. You know, that's where that instrument hails from. But yeah, it gives this mystique to the whole film that is very interesting because it's so magical. We are jumping. It becomes a time machine, very evidently. You know, that magic that comes from the instrument. It's almost an echo from the past. You know, that instrument that is very interesting.
But that's interesting because it kind of echoes the whole mystery of the film, where we don't really know what happened to the three friends that died. So I mean, I'm not saying it directly connects it, but it's interesting because it supports the overall mystery of what the hell happened.
Exactly.
30
Who
years
was the
ago.
backstabber?
Yeah.
You know, what exactly happened to Max? It all stems from that one incident, and then the story unfolds to see how they fell apart. Yes, that's interesting. But I do agree, Jake, that the two characters of Max and Noodles, them together, how they are against each other. You know, one being more ambitious, the other kind of having become humble from the experience of prison and not being so ambitious, want to remain with what he has. It's very seeable, it's very tangible, and you see how, in a way, at the same time, both need each other to survive. But the one thing that, you know, at the beginning of this conversation, I was saying that I had some issues with the film. They don't spoil the film for me, but the biggest thing I have an issue with is the matter of conflict, so to speak, because there's this suggestion at the beginning of the film, and that is carried out, particularly pertaining the character of Jennifer Connelly, that is Deborah. That character being at the center of his conflict: do I belong in the gangster world, the world of violence, or could I have a more sort of settled life and be, have a normal life, essentially, be content, so to speak, with her, because that's kind of the question that she poses him at the very beginning of the story. And I think that's not really carried out fully, because, you know, we kind of live divided in these two worlds: when he is with Max, when he is with her, and whenever he is with her, he's only with her for a very short amount of time. Almost to the point that it's kind of laughable when she shows up for me, because it's like, oh, here I am again, ready to torment you again with my questions, Noodles. So have you left him? No? Run along to mommy, and she goes away. So it's almost like she spikes him, but then she completely leaves the story, and she's so briefly there. That's what I mean. That in her absence, she ceases to exist almost. When she's there again, I've been thinking about you the whole time, and then away. It's a completely blank. When she's not there, it's like Max, 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 and they are all along their little plottings and etc. within the crime world. But the consistency of that conflict. Where do I belong? Do I want to, which is suggested at the beginning, has that the drama should be that, and rightfully so, because that will make the story more interesting. And it's when we always return to that when he is with her, it doesn't really sustain for me. And then at the end, when they have that whole dance, that ball, that date, really, that which is really tragic when it ends. Again, very elegantly shot, because again, he's a great director. He is able to, despite the inconsistencies of said conflict, the elegance with which he creates this mise-en-scène, and the music as well, working with it, that wide shot that then pushes to them while they dance, with that sweep, it's amazing and lush. But ultimately, she says, I'm going to Hollywood, I'm going away, and he is distraught. And I'm distraught for him. And when they get into the cab, and then she starts kissing him, and I'm like, whoa, I mean, what? Why are you doing that to the guy? But then, here I am feeling sorry for him, and then what proceeds is one of the most horrible, gut-wrenching rape scenes I've ever seen in my life. I mean, I felt that in the first time I watched the movie, and when I watched the second time, I was like, I can barely watch this. I mean, Gaspar Noé to the side, this is one of the most horrible rape scenes I've ever seen in my life. And the tie between me and the character of Robert De Niro just gets cut there. I mean, you still care for him because he's Robert De Niro. It's in a way, there's a cinephile self who connects with the actor, and then there's the question of character, so to speak. He's always Robert De Niro up on the screen. But my care for the character, my sympathy for him fades a bit away, because he just does a very horrible thing. And I don't think, and adding to that the fact that the conflict is very inconsistent in its way throughout the film, in his relationship to her, and the questions that she poses him and the meaning that they should have, this whole scene that should feel more, deserving, so to speak, dramatically speaking, just feels like, I don't know, I just hate the character. Or I don't hate, I dislike him. I dislike the protagonist because dramatically speaking hasn't served his purpose in terms of the main conflict, so to speak, for me. Um, and then this scene happens and then it's like my umbilical cord with him has been cut. And then scenes after, here we are in the present moment, he finds her again in the little dressing room. And amazingly directed scene. I love the acting there. We must talk about that as well. But the way she reacts to him, I'm like, out the door right now. Like, you cannot react like, oh yeah, Noodles, come on in. Do you want tea? Like, what the
My
fuck?
good pal.
He raped you. Like one of the most horrible things you can buy. And you were like, oh yeah, sure. Like, I was like, this is not realistic at all. And it's like, and he's all poetic saying, maybe you should say, how are you? And no. Bob, no, Bob, time out. What are you
Time out.
doing? Like, this is bad. So I want to know what you think about all this, because this always leads. I love the film, but this does constitute questions for me, like as I watch it.
Well, thanks for the softball question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, um, that the rape scene itself, as I was watching it this time, I was really impressed by how both of this might sound like a bit of a cop out, but I'll follow it up. I feel like the performances from both were
Oh, for sure.
fantastic. I mean, you can tell that they both said, "Okay, well, let's go. Let's go all in." And it feels, and that I think that's part of the reason why it feels so visceral and where you really have that kind of, yeah. Because I remember the first time seeing it, I went, "Wait, what's going on now?" I was, you almost can't believe it because you're like, this is our lead character. He was such
Yeah.
a,
Tender and
yeah,
understanding.
but I mean, at the same time, I don't think it's spurred out of the blue, him acting that way. I think
Oh
the
no.
I mean,
the
he raped
crumbs were
someone
there.
earlier
Yeah,
Exactly,
during
exactly,
the robbery. So
Yeah, I think that moment for Noodles is like, okay, yeah, this is the culmination of a life of, you know, being kind of a bit of a pervert. But,
Yeah.
yeah, from childhood.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Um, First thing we see of him as a kid is him peeping on her,
Yeah, exactly.
Um, yeah, I definitely agree that when he walks in the room, what, 30 something years, 35 years later, and he's like, aren't you gonna say, I'm like, well, I don't think you've earned that, pal. It's like,
Exactly.
yeah, like I see what you mean there. Yeah, I mean to me the main relationship is Max and Noodles. To me that's way more
Hmm.
poignant. And I think the movie knows that. The only thing that's like sort of redeemable in their relationship, Deborah and Noodles, is Elizabeth McGovern's performance. Although sometimes I watch her, I'm like, okay, she can't hold a candle to De Niro, I feel like a little bit. Sometimes in the scenes I can
Yeah.
see him just so present, and then I can tell she's
Yeah.
trying to kind of stay along, but she's still great in the movie in her own right. And just, I don't know, just something about the dynamic, obviously before the rape, I think is there. I feel like it's there. Granted, it's not the best love story ever put to film, but it's I don't know, it just the way it's presented in certain moments, like the dance and it's more like cerebral, I'd say, more than like, oh, this is a really well penned relationship.
For me, I mean, that rape scene is the movie is already like that's the thing. Like it didn't click for me. I think it's part of that. First off, we start with it's almost like 1 hour and 30 minutes where we mostly follow them as kids, and like the kids, the actors. I just wasn't really into them. I just thought they weren't super good, and so I was like, "Oh, can we just get De Niro already?" And then we go to De Niro, and eventually he does something like just so horrifying, like the way he does it, that it's really challenging. So that Leon knows, like he's challenging the audience to something horrifying and portraying the character in its full, like portraying it as fully as he can to all its flaws. So in one way, I respect that, but then I mean, it's just how do I watch the rest of the film? It's really difficult for me because I'm like, I like he walks away from the camera like, just kill yourself now, just jump off into the water or something. Like, I don't care about
Because
you
also,
anymore.
what's kind of funny about it is to me, Noodles, in a way, although he has, he's interesting figure well laid out, with the kind of the humble spirit that he gains and the sort of soft side. There's also something to him as a character that feels a little bit the generic gangster protagonist, where, after that scene, his face is like blank. He watches her go away on the train, blank face, like,
Yeah,
I don't know
it's
what
like
to
he
think
broke
about
up
this,
with
and
her.
goes away. Yeah, like there's a sense of levity to it that I don't think it is to do with the situation. Then again, because De Niro is De Niro and such a good actor, and Leone is Leone, and creating these elegant scenes that really bring out the pathos from the scene, you can still have some sort of connection to the film and to its themes. But it is challenging at times to relate with him, the character of Noodles. The kids, I do get what you mean. The kids can be challenging at times, but I think there's some non-actor charm of Leone's playing around there, because if you see his previous films, there, the actors are never tip top, but there's a certain charm to that, a certain charm to the fact that he uses, the dubbed aspect, which in this film is not there as much. There were only a couple of moments where I felt, I can feel it
I
here
don't know.
There
a
was
little bit.
There's a couple
Well,
of rough
there, but no, do
patches.
you feel it all the time?
No,
No,
sure.
no.
Yeah, that's the thing. No, I mean, comparing to the Western spaghetti ones, I don't feel so. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, regarding the actors, I mean, just the point that Jennifer Connelly, she's a perfectly good actress, but I mean, even in this film, she's as a child actor. I mean, there are no
Exactly,
miracles.
exactly.
So.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course, there's
well,
always the
well
risk of
put.
that.
But
It's
I
demanding. Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like there was never a point where I saw the. I know we're kind of hitting hard on this rape scene, but it's
Oh,
a big moment because
Yeah.
it's so
It's where a
shocking.
lot of people do like cut out of the film and say that they hate it. Where
I
it's
understand.
like,
I mean, it's not an easy watch. I mean, and although I think, I mean, I think he does a really good job early on of sort of, there's always the thing about stylized violence in movies, and I think it's really true here. I mean, certain things that occur. I mean, it's really like mean-spirited violence. Like some movies you see, and it's like bang bang, oh, but this is like. I mean, one of the first scenes is obviously De Niro's girlfriend getting shot in the bed thing. But then like he puts the barrel of the gun on the nipple and he drags it across.
oh yeah.
He sticks the gun in his nose and there's so many like barrels in the eye shots and obviously that first beating scene with Max and Noodles where they, you know, stomp on their nuts basically and just like pound them. I mean, there's just a real like nastiness to the violence. I think that's really I think everything is set up well in that way because I mean you get it instantly. It's a conscious effort because usually in a movie you take the gun and put it at the woman's heart, but not in this movie. In this movie, he takes it and like grazes it on her nipple just to like kind of rub your nose and like, oh, this is going to be a rough movie about rough people in a time that was pretty ruthless.
Yeah,
Um,
even in terms of the meanness and violence you're describing, I mean, even the death of the kid, when they were kids, I mean, it was kind of surprising to me because I didn't really expect the violence to escalate to that point where he just is chased down the street and is shot. And it's just a kid. I mean, it's the one where you'd think they'd be more benevolent towards, I suppose, because he's so like not completely inside this world, and yet he's the one that is shot, and he is purposely aiming at the kids. So it was kind of for me, it was one of the first instances of the film where I was a bit surprised, like narratively, where of the choices that were being made, because I really didn't expect things to become so gruesome at that point. But yeah, overall, it all builds up. I guess it's all there, and I think also in terms, this is what I wanted to say before. I think the period in prison is kind of hinted that it really jarred with De Niro's mind because
Oh
immediately
yeah.
when he's
Yeah.
picked up, he gets down on this girl basically and has sex with her, and so there's this suggestion that this man that is coming back is kind of lustful and not the same in some way, and only exacerbated the sort of naughty instincts that he already had. So even though I agree that the rape scene is a bit, you know, strange in a sense, yeah, I think we can all agree that it does have some bearing with everything that came before, and especially
Yeah,
considering
absolutely.
the time that he
Yeah,
spent in
definitely.
prison.
I think it's, the rape scene, I think, like Jake said, it's supremely directed and acted, so much so that the very effect that it has is so guttural and bothersome in the intention that he wants to have. So, it is successful to that effect of what wants me feel repelled and repelled by my main protagonist. And to that effect, when I saw it the first time, and also I have to say the staging of it with the projection on the backside of the car, for a film that you already know that can film, cars on the move and have the real world around it as it goes, for that choice to be there so specifically after a date scene in this lavish hotel, so to speak, by the beach, and this satin kind of towel laid out where he declares this poem to her, the poem that she told him or declared to him when they were kids. I mean, it's a fairy tale, and that projection as well is almost like indicative of that fairy tale moving on, still going, that fake world, and they are inside this, carriage car. Everything is going the right direction until that awful thing, and so to that effect, the scene, is masterful, and I see its full intention. The only way I said that it could have had even more impact was if the conflict of De Niro with this girl had been fully fledged, explored, because in the moments when she's not with her, when he is with Max, I think there would be plenty of good opportunities to make him think, about her and feel divided between Max or her, because it's still to do with Max. It's still to do whether he wants to belong or not to this world, or whether he fits or not, where he is above Max or not, which is ultimately something that is very embedded in the last scene, where will I go with you and respond to your request of killing you, or am I above all this and I'm the better man, I won't do that because I'm not like you. There's something very interesting as well in terms of am I like you, am I not like you, and what these two men feel about themselves, and the way the exposition is relayed over time. It's very interesting that very late in the game we get to see a little bit more about Max, about his story, the craziness, the insanity of his father that went to the asylum, and how he does not want to feel like his dad, and he has that trigger thing with the line, you are crazy, that De Niro delivers so well. You see that these both men have a chip on their shoulders regarding their heritage, their class, the things they were born into and can control, which I think is another current theme that may go amiss, but it's very interesting. It's in the very beginning when you see, for these kid actors who have a few troubles with acting, there are precious moments, and one of those precious moments was when you have the kid who is the younger version of Noodles with Jennifer Connelly in the back kind of part of the like coffee house sort of thing with the apples and everything, and she tells him that poem, and you really feel he's in the scene, he's listening to her and he's reacting to the poem as if he was the boy in the poem, and it's beautiful, and it's a blood pact in there. The two are for each other. I may believe it more or less, but there it is, and you can see through the poem, very obviously said in the poem, that there's something about him being this shaggy dog with shaggy clothes, and he's really ashamed of it all, of using them, of bearing them, so much so that he wants to rise up to the top and be somebody for you, that whole thing of, I want to buy you cool things, I want to buy you clothes, I want you to have everything, that kind of relationship between men and women in olden times with that kind of discourse. He comes from that kind of ideology with her, and she's basically saying, you don't need none of that, you just need to be yourself and love me. But he throughout the whole film, you see what I mean? So there's the suggestion of this and how this could be developed as a conflict in him, be divided into worlds that I didn't see being really developed. But that is interesting, nonetheless, and I think that is there for all intents and purposes until the very end. And for Max, you have this chip on his shoulder is to do with his craziness and how he tries to flee. So if for one, you have Noodles with his social class. For Max, also there's a question of social class, but with him, there's a question of not being like his father before him, not being insane, so always having the best ideas. He's the brains of the operation, and he ultimately rises to the top of the top, being the senator. But somehow Noodles gets to have the last word, and I think the construction of that, until the very end is very interesting. And the flashback, the ultimate flashback at the end, Jake, I think it works so well because it functions has an answer to a question. Why won't you kill me after all these 30 years of grief that I engraved on you? And he doesn't say anything but that flashback because of our friendship. So yeah, I don't have that sense of payback and vengeance, that anger that you have inside you, that makes me call you crazy, because you're like Heath Ledger says, you're a dog chasing cars. I don't know what kind of connection I've established here, but I did. He's like a dog chasing cars, he can't let off that bone of being the rich man, the best of them all. So yeah, all those ideas are interesting. That's what they are, the meat and bones of the two characters.
That, like you were speaking to that dynamic of how they're both different. Max wants to constantly expand, and Noodles has that great line. I like the stink of the streets. It opens my lungs, and that's, to me, that's him. Like, you even see in the opening. Obviously, you don't get it, but on a rewatch, I understood it when that opening, when he has forced to flee, and you think, you're probably like, well, that's probably the first time he's ever really left, and he's looking at that sign of Coney Island, and he's like, you can tell he's like, wow. And then when he comes back, you can just, to me, that's such a great way of showing, like, wow, all of these feelings have sort of come back to him. Max is always, let's go bigger, let's do this, and it makes sense because, Max, from what I understand, I mean, obviously he moved there in the beginning, but I would imagine he's moved around a bit more. So he has a bigger scope of the world, as opposed to Noodles, who's just like, no, we're doing good. Let's keep it that way, what's wrong with 1 million? Why do we, like he says, why do we have to have
20?
And yeah, exactly. It's a great contrast between the two, and it really kind of fills in their characters, I guess.
Yeah, definitely. And I have to say that one scene, I love how the iconography changes, because it's not just the cue of the empty shot that is confronting the glass door and then the face of the Nero becoming this old face, but has the camera makes a traveling push out, revealing how the iconography of the American dream essentially changes from this 30s, well, it's more akin to the 1920s kind of crazy years, with the Coney Island kind of attractions transforming into this touristic attraction, the city itself, with the Big Apple. I think it's quite heartbreaking because in one shot you see his whole world falling apart. My heart breaks for him. Yeah.
There's so much to the film. I think ultimately, for me, maybe the biggest problem with the film, but also what makes it what it is that it's so, like, everything is born out of the subjectivity of the main character, which is Noodles. And so everything that happens is, you kind of have to see it through that lens. It's his memories of that, except when we're in the 60s. Obviously, that's sort of contemporary, but when we go into that shot of the flame that then goes into the lamp as the phone rings, as we were saying, like, it's clearly communicating that this is in his mind, that what we're seeing is his memories, and they're going to be shaped by who he is. And we know that he's a super troubled person, or we find that he's a super troubled person with a lot of flaws. It's horrible, there's horrible things. But that's why also, in a way, it makes sense that he doesn't really get confronted by a lot of those horrible things that he does, or at least he doesn't show as much remorse as we ideally would like to see, for us to follow him better. Because if he showed more remorse, or if he showed up with at the end, and he apologized to her, which it's not enough, but at least it's something. It's not cracking jokes,
It's true.
would be better.
It is true.
But that's he's a flawed guy, terrible person, product of his context, and that's what Leon wanted to do. And I think that's commendable, but it's also like what makes it difficult.
It's a mixed bag, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
you also
exactly.
have that beautiful music of Ennio Morricone asking you to it's the violin, it's the melancholy, it's the,
In a way,
it's
it's very
trying to.
manipulative because it's like, there's child prostitution happening at the same time, a beautiful composition in the background. It's like, this is, you're demanding a lot of me, and Sergio, but, I get it, it's the memories of this guy. He's gonna look at his youth with, with nostalgia, even if the
Yeah.
things that he's reminiscing about are deeply like horrible and difficult, but that's the way people remember things a lot of times.
Hmm.
Even they sometimes there's a lot of people are like this, like they reminisce about the troubles in their time with a lot of happiness. I had to walk 50 miles to go to school and just stuff like that, but it's the way people are, which again, it's interesting, but I don't know. It's what I was saying in the beginning, that the music sometimes I felt was a little too much in like bringing out that pathos, while the things on screen are so horrible that it's such a, it creates such a conflict between the feelings that the music is bringing out in you versus what you're seeing on screen. That is, it's very impressive, at the same time it's very demanding. That's why the film is difficult, but I enjoy that difficulty at the same time that I have trouble fully getting into it and that clicking. But I mean, it's impressive nonetheless.
Yeah, I to me, the way I view it, is I would say is more so like what you touched upon. It's this guy's memory, and these are like nasty guys, all of them pretty much. So it's, yeah, he's gonna look back on it with a certain fondness. I mean, there's literally it's a wild scene when, after he basically rapes Tuesday Weld. After that scene, which by the way, she's fantastic. I think Tuesday Weld is. I don't know why she isn't mentioned with De Niro and James Woods, because I think she's up there with the two of them, honestly. But that scene after he rapes her during the bank robbery, and then they meet again, and they all put the things on, and you
Yeah.
know, she
Yeah.
picks them out from their, um,
Hmm. Hmm. Hmm.
um, things like that are, obviously from his memory. They're, oh, that's a cute memory, I guess, where
Yeah.
if you look at it, really, you're like, geez, I mean, so to me, that's kind of, yeah, like you said, the subjectivity is to me what makes it work, because you're viewing a time and a place and a group of people who are not squeaky clean, but it's all viewed through the same lens, I guess, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's sort of, it's, to me, it's like, it's like bearing it all in a way. So that's sort of the way I feel about the kind of nostalgia, even of the rougher stuff. It's about these guys, and that to them is nostalgia, like you said, basically.
Yeah, and in a sense, the music sometimes can be trying to emulate his thoughts, or his nostalgia of the moments, in a sense, almost trying to express the regret that he had in certain situations, or how he felt he didn't act right. So I'm not entirely sure that's what Ennio and Leone were trying to do, but in a sense, it's interesting because it can mirror a bit his present thoughts in the future. That at the time he wasn't acting well, and so it's expressing a bit of regret and sorrow. But just a theory, unproven theory.
Yeah, I mean, even the action of going to the opium den, like he's going there. I think like he becomes addicted after Deborah leaves. In a way, I think that action of him becoming addicted is a way to ease the regret, ease the remorse, and to become, sedated and not think about the horrible things. Or
We don't know. Or can be the remorse, or just feeling bad that she's away. I don't even feel remorse. I'm
yeah,
just
yeah, no,
thinking
yeah.
that's because I feel
I'm
that she
positing
went
the
away.
possibility because it's the literal, it's how it ends the movie. So I think, right, it ends with
Yeah.
him smoking the thing. I think there's something about that action that Inu, Sergio really wanted to highlight, that sedation, that that's how people live with their horrible actions. It's through becoming numb to it.
Uh-huh.
And then if you extend that, like Once Upon a Time in America, there's the myth making and the legends of the United States and all that. And it's like, I think there's something to that ending that I think is clear, because he could have ended it somewhere else, but it begins in the 30s in the opium den and it ends there as well. So I think it's an interesting choice that got me thinking.
But we do arrive at an interesting point, which is I was not expecting, which is to discuss the subjectivity of the film in light with the music that Ennio Morricone provides and the subjectivity that is very connected with this main character. It is difficult, isn't it, Lenny? You said it kind of very well. You all said it very well that it's difficult. I can see how different people can take one side of the argument and be dissatisfied with the character, not want to see him, Noodles. And on the other hand, really see how these bad guys, these nasty guys, are all of this encompassed, all of these feelings, all of these bad actions, all of this bad behavior, all of this ill stuff, done to other people and even loved ones. And yet they have the right as human beings. I mean, not the right, but just a natural inclination and natural behavior, natural attraction to just seek out pleasure, just feel good, just have good memories, just have laughs, just have, because it's that mucky, in that they don't feel bad all the time or make themselves feel bad all the time. They are a reservoir as human beings to all these things, and that's what we are exposed to. Instead of the film having him apologize, he's actually focusing on the good memories, right? When even the ones that were jokey, like them all with the bandanas and having the thing with the girl. It's all of that mixed together, which makes the film ultimately interesting. For example, I wouldn't even pick that scene, just to finish out. I wouldn't even pick that scene of the dressing room. I wouldn't even correct it. This is Delaney. I wouldn't even correct it in the sense that I would like him to apologize, of course, but because being the character he is and the intention that the movie has, at the very least, in order to correct the scene, so to speak, it would even be his action. I would wait more her action, her reaction of just like, get out. Because he's not going to apologize, at least as far as the intention of the filmmaker goes. But she should, just for the sake of sanity, and it's just go away. I don't see her acceptance. But yeah, Mike, go ahead.
No, I'm just gonna say I think that volatility is kind of mirrored in that scene after they have the encounter with Joe Pesci's character, and then they're in the car and they're having this sort of discussion about, maybe the next day he's gonna ask me to kill you, and I think that it's this sort of faux trust that exists in this crime world where you don't really know what the next day is gonna be and where your friends are, and so all their lives is just, even though they're friends and they trust each other, clearly by the end we understand that that's not entirely true. And yeah, I mean it it must be hard to live such a life mentally. I mean it should be very exhausting, and these are people that have very deep trust issues, and it's interesting to see that sometimes in De Niro's character, also in how he establishes a relationship with Deborah. So yeah, I think it's important not to forget that these are very troubled people and do very contradictory things sometimes.
And to the question of trust, Sergio Leone keeps a narrative device and visual device in this film that is very reminiscent from his previous spaghetti westerns, which is the way he builds up tension through just looks and eyes across a room with people looking. Well, the very iconic scene in this film to that regard where that is most effectful is when the friends, it's the very last scene where I think Robert De Niro just, you have James Woods on a throne, there's that whole thing, and then they part ways. I think they part ways, and you can see the whole tension in the room as James Wood and the other members of the gang are in on, them having done the hard work to advance the gang's life, and yet De Niro was out and away on his opium den. And you just can see that distrust, the trust that you were talking about, Miguel, through the eyes, which I think is something that a good friend of ours from the film school days, João, said that's Leone, Tomás, that's tension. That's how they live in the West. Because we used to talk with him about westerns, and in his westerns, what I mean to say by this is in these westerns, a lot of the plot It's just people looking at each other, and at any moment now, something horrifying can happen, and that's what these people live by. It's the law of being the weakest or the strongest. Who is going to survive, and I think that is always the one of the interests of Leone, that he comes back and he realizes in visually in such a good fashion, I think.
It's funny that you bring up the looks because to me, I don't know if y'all felt this way, but the close-ups were framed really. There's a lot of odd close-up choices in this because
Okay.
usually like the guy of close-up, that kind of tight widescreen, like, just
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
visage
Uh-huh.
kind of
Uh-huh.
thing.
Yeah.
But in this, the close-ups are filmed like that sometimes. They're filmed like that. It's almost, I was like, this is interesting. Like, this is not how he
I guess
usually does
the
that.
aspect ratio
Right.
being different maybe
Maybe that's what it is.
plays a
Yeah.
role.
Purposeful. Yeah.
Because yeah,
Because
usually you
I was there was
associate
a moment
Leon with the wide screen, so it's like
exactly.
very wide
Yeah.
because it
Yeah. Yeah.
feels
Yeah.
boxy. It is very
That might be what it is. Yeah. Because it just really kind of was jarring because you're so used to Clint Eastwood, and Eli
the
Wallach being
strip.
shot like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, there's so much great stuff. I love that he just lets things sort of play out, like that scene on the throne. Like I don't know why that shot of James Woods when it's like when he just has that cigar and he just like slowly kind of it's really stretches that out. Um, it's I don't know, it's interesting. There's just so many, looks he lets play out and so many scenes. Oh, and the kid, I'm just going off of, things he lets play out um when Patsy has when he's young and he brings the little
Oh
cake for
yeah.
the
The
girl.
cake, yeah.
And he just sits there and eats the whole thing. And he's like, no, I'm not gonna cut away. I'm just gonna shoot this. And I don't know why. It's just, it's like something I can't really explain. It's just oddly affecting. And it just sort of takes me back to, certain moments. And I think he's very, keenly aware of that, some of this is just there's just things that are going to just make you feel like, oh yeah, you were watching real kids who happen to grow up in a time and a place where violence and wrongdoing was their reality, but they're still kids and they still have these sort of childish impulses. um and that's just a beautiful. He's really great at showing things, I feel like, instead of show don't tell. I feel like that's a great way of just showing that, and just letting their actions, even if they seem insignificant, letting that sort of build a foundation for them.
I think one of the most beautiful moments as well to that effect. Well, first of all, going back to the opening, he does something incredible, which is to the string of noise that is the telephone. He unites these different scenes, which are various flashbacks that progressively go backwards and backwards and backwards, like this magical thing almost never before seen in film, where a flashback precedes a flashback that precedes a flashback. It's like he's doing juggling, and it's like suddenly see a coffin with prohibition in the back. It's such a phantasmagorical shot, and then he reveals the world bits by bits, essentially, because that shot is almost like point of view shot. It is from Robert De Niro's perspective in that kind of room, and then you see Robert, you see where the other characters are, you see all the aspect of the blocking, and how he goes away into the back room to have the phone with the cop, and that's like the moment of the original sin, so to speak, where he presumably backstabs them, and that going back to the original cause of what is this all chaos and mayhem at the start of the film. That's interesting that he chooses to lay out the action that way. It makes everything so much more mysterious. You are going to the back of the head of the psyche of this man, which I think it's very well illustrated. But another moment is also, I just love the graveyard scene. I just love him going to the mausoleum productions.
Oh,
Ching. But
good one. Yeah.
yeah,
His
yeah.
plug.
Yeah.
There you go. But yeah, I just love him going to the mausoleum of his old friends, and just the focus on the revolving door. Well, it's not a revolving door, but it's the door that he opens that has this whole feminine sculpture, very elegant, and then again the pan flute renders that mystique, that magic from the past haunting him back, and he enters the place and he turns the door in and out, in and out. It's as if he's in the limbo purgatory between the land of the dead and the living, and he's examining as if that's what I would exactly do. I would enter a place like that. I would look at the ceiling, and it's a shot that I would almost say that's that's an ugly shot. If I were to look at an empty ceiling on only the corners, but in the mystique of it all, in the composition, it's not the shot as a unit that carries meaning, because it's composition within this whole place that is the mausoleum that gives way to it all. The really beautiful shot reserves to something else, which is the moment of the door, and the little zooms he's able to insert in with the camera movement that really help to the magic. It's a repetitive gesture, so it's really magical. But the one that really pulls me in is when he closes the door and he's moving and the camera is moving with him, and we almost see him. Well, we see him sit down and the door closes in on him like this, and he gets in the dark. He's with the dead, and I think it's just a charming shot. And he finally looks at the key that unveils another secret from the past. But I think that's an amazing scene.
Just to highlight another scene that had a moment that I enjoyed was when he comes back to Deborah 30 years later, and he's in the dressing room. And I also at first confused by it, because with that makeup, she seems like she hasn't aged anything, which is
That's the
interesting
point,
because
isn't it? Which is interesting, yeah.
because they hint at that with the poster and the fact that age does not wither her.
Exactly.
But beyond that, as we were talking about the pacing of the scenes, it's so interesting because she's constantly taking makeup off of her face. But then she kind of puts it back on in some places. So it's almost like she keeps doing the same thing for such a long scene. And every time you look at her, she still has makeup on. And it's interesting how, the acting there is just, well, it mirrors very well how a nervous person would be in that situation, kind of just doing things over and over again and not really knowing where to start. And I think it's a great piece of acting, directing from the pair. But
the
beyond
detail
it,
in there.
yeah, the detail.
The detail of they went the trouble, which they should have the trouble to do, of putting the wrinkles in the right place, with the eyes, even beneath that makeup, because at first I saw her and I thought she hasn't changed a bit, even with the makeup. So I thought maybe they're not, she starts taking it out. I thought maybe it's just, it's the same, but no, they really put in the wrinkles, and that surprised me to actually see the age in her. Yeah.
No, overall, it has a lot of interesting elements, that scene, I think.
Joe Pesci is in this movie. Barely.
Joe Pesci. I mean, I was like, what? First, I was like, what? In the credits when he appears, Joe Pesci. In what scene is Joe Pesci in this film? And then when he pops up, I'm like, wow, Joe Pesci did this film. All right. Very briefly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's interesting.
Frankie.
Yeah. He's great. I mean, there's so much. I was rewatching that scene just before doing this, and just the way he kind of. There's that moment when, Burt Young, who's great, by the way. Burt Young is so great in that scene, he's talking about the cock insurance, and he's eating that sandwich, and he's like, and his huge paws. I mean, he's a big dude. But then Pesci, when after he says kid stuff, and then De Niro goes, well, why don't you get the kids from Detroit to do it? And you see Pesci just like on a dime, just that oh, Noodles, excuse me, that kind of menace just instantly. I just go, man, this guy,
Yeah.
I don't know what he's tapped into to get this, but he can turn it on like that. It's really, really great stuff.
Yeah.
I do wonder about his role, because it seems like it was bigger, but and the baby swap scene.
Oh yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely. There's something Clockwork Orange about it,
Yeah, there you
They're all
go.
in whites,
Yeah.
all in bandanas. And the music itself is classical. I don't know if it's Beethoven. Mike needs to correct me on this because he's a
It's very
pianist. But
Clockwork Orange, Kubrick inspired thing. Yeah.
and there's a whole choreography about it, because of the music as well. And there are little, mischievous fellas, the trick. But to that effect, there's also something to be noted about this film, is that there's something similar to what Kurosawa does, particularly in Ran, where there's a moment in the film where there's no soundscape at all, just music over it, and you see this is in Ran of Kurosawa's, and you just see the battle and everything being destroyed, and the king, being sieged by his own sons. Well, in here you have more than one sequence where there's no soundscape and it's just the music and the interchange of looks and these amazing emotional beats, like Noodles when he comes back to town, and he's on the phone booth and he sees his friend on the other side on the coffee house and or the bar, whatever you want to call it, and he's like dispensing with the clients, and you just see it from a distance from his point of view. I find that moment a little. It's very tiny, but immediately creates a connection with his essentially side character. Apparently, he's this long-time big friend. We don't see them a lot, really. I mean, oftentimes they're made to feel like they were big friends, but I felt I was a little bit lost in everything. Didn't hurt, but was a bit strange.
They treat Mo like shit in every scene. Even he's like Noodles, and he's me like, all right, he's like, all right.
Yeah, it's a bit like that. Yeah, true.
They like rag him in every scene. But something else I was really kind of think is interesting. Like almost every way they advance themselves in this movie is based upon some sort of like personal, I don't know what you call it, like personal scandal, like the cop being a pedophile or them taking the babies. It's almost like, so to me, it's almost suggesting like that's how the wheel keeps turning. You hit people where they live. You find things that are gonna. It's not about Treat Williams says. You guys were able to do more in one night than I was able to
Exactly.
do in 2 years of talking. And I think that's really well illustrated. That almost like everything they get in this movie is because of something kind of
Brute
either
force.
dirty or like deranged, and that's kind of what America, I guess, has been built on. That sounds a little trite, but in a way, I do think that's kind of what he's suggesting a little bit, which is an interesting way of looking at it, and I think not a wrong way of looking at it.
Yeah, it goes back to that, I think that ramification of the American history that gangster films tend to explore, and that there is here hinted in this film where politics specifically are the finest example of that, how, of America, of what America was built upon, where the gangsters eventually influence, senators and politicians to do their bidding, essentially. And you kind of see that in other instances, for example, in The Irishman with the Teamsters and everything. So here you have, of course, him becoming a senator. So yeah, there's something to that with the effect that the syndicate man is saying, you've done it all just with punches. Yeah, it's an interesting thing.
And just another
Um,
way that reinforces this idea that if you're born in this context, you really have no way out. And you're just kind of doomed in a sense to just live this life where everything, as you said, Jake, it's just a scandal after scandal, and everything that you do to the next person that gets you going a bit more and a bit farther, and which is a bit, it's sad because it's kind of hopeless in a sense. But yeah, much.
Deborah had a way out. She could have stayed in
Deborah,
the world, for example.
Deborah wasn't. I wouldn't include her in the sort of gang
She's not a
world.
gangster.
Okay, fine. But I think this is all
But
Yeah, yeah,
among
yeah.
the
varied.
guys,
She could stay. Peg is okay. Peg is part of the gang, of the gangster world. You could say that, so
yeah,
to
Peggy
speak.
is a
She
gangster for
profits
sure.
from it.
No, but Deborah could have, I guess, like joined them or something
But
like that.
what I mean to say is there's always a choice. Now I sound like Spider-Man. You have always a choice, Peter, or something. But the thing is, there's always a choice. You can remain in this role, be part of it, more directly or indirectly. Peggy's not a gangster per se in the sense that she is a gangster, but she profits from it. She's on the margins. She's working with it. She went away. She decided to went away. One way or another, we don't know. So that's what I mean. So it's and that's ultimately what could have been there. That's the basis of me. The feeling that one of the problems with this film is that there was a conflict suggested at the beginning that the main character could have, and it's always hinted at. They never really let it off. They never really dispensed with it, but it's never really developed. Which is this thing with the Deborah character and what that means. His divide between the gangster world or becoming one with her, and just an average dude. Living his life normal, no risk free.
As I was watching the scene with Noodles and Deborah at the end, where they sort of reconcile, but not really, and she's taking the makeup off, you just really get a sense of how well orchestrated the music and the dialogue and everything's. And, this might sound obvious, but it's to me, it's really amplified in his way of making movies. It's like everything is just in step. It's literally like every element is.
Choreography. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's everything is tuned at the same rate. It's just really good filmmaking, I feel like.
Like I sympathize with the side of people that you know, feel just that they can't connect to the film because of the horrible actions of the character. But I think there's just so much, even just like in the level of the filmmaking, that is so impressive, so amazing, that like I cannot
Exactly.
not be impressed by this film. It's just there's so much here. And like I think once you understand, or maybe like accept that this is like an hyper subjective film, I think it's a lot easier to digest the flaws of the character and how like maybe he's a terrible guy. He's gonna look back on things with a terrible view. It is the way it is. Yeah.
I kind of share your thoughts. I thought just overall that for such an epic film, such a long film, it's very watchable, very interesting, very engaging, and just does everything well that you won't expect from a film at so many levels that you just cannot, as you said, be engaged by it and enjoy the filmmaking and the filmmaking art. Just everything is working here at so many levels. So yeah.
That's all for today, folks. If you'd like to reach out and suggest a film for the next episode, you can find us on the podcast official Instagram and website pages. Feel free to subscribe, share this episode, or simply give us a like. That's how our podcast can grow ever more groovy. And if you're on YouTube and want to see more videos like this, check out this next video right here. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.